Please join me in welcoming Jeff Bezos. Well, Jeff, we're happy to have you with us this evening.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
It means a lot to all of us. I'll tell you, we as Utahns are just really, really anxious to hear from you tonight. And you've asked me to ask you some questions that we have come up with. That I hope they'll be good questions. I hope you'll enjoy them, and I know that your answers will cause a lot of enjoyment for our folks out there. Now, you're based in Seattle, but I understand that you started your business career on Wall Street after graduating from Princeton University with a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. What motivated you to have a successful career and drive across the country to start Amazon?
Well, it was in early 1994, I came across the fact that web usage was growing at a fantastic rate. It was still very, very tiny. The baseline usage was very small, but anything growing that fast, even if it has a small baseline, it's going to be, ubiquitous very quickly. And so that was sort of the wake-up call. And I started thinking about what kind of businesses I could start on the internet, and picked books as the first best category to sell online because books were very unusual in one respect, and that is that there are more items in the book category than in any other category. There were like 3 million books active and in print, and the largest physical book superstores only carried about 150,000 titles. So I could make a bookstore that really had universal selection, and that was sort of the founding concept of Amazon. So when I had this business idea, I went to my boss, who I had great respect for. He's still one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's a computer scientist named David Shaw, and he started a hedge fund. It's been a very successful quantitative hedge fund. We were all computer programmers at the hedge fund, and we programmed the computers, and the computers made all the trading decisions. And I went to David, and I told him I was going to go do this thing. And I've only been married to my wife for 1 year, and I told her, she's like, all right, let's go. And I went and told my boss, and he listened for a long time. And he said, let's go on a walk in Central Park. So we went on a 2-hour walk in Central Park. And he said, Jeff, this actually sounds like a good idea to me, but it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have such a good job. And that actually made a lot of sense to me. I thought that's pretty logical. And so he convinced me to think about it for 48 hours before making a final decision. And I went home, and I was really trying to figure out how to think about this big life decision. And I finally came across the right framework to think about it, which was I projected myself to age 80, and I don't want to have any regrets. I want to minimize the number of regrets I have when I look back over my life. And I thought, if I try this and fail, I'm not going to regret that. And if I never try it, I'm always going to be haunted by having not given it a try. And as soon as I thought about it that way, all the other things, all the little confusing details like, wait, it's the middle of the year, I've already earned half of my annual bonus and I'm not going to get any of it, those kinds of things all vanished when I thought about it in terms of minimizing life regrets. And I do believe, and I believe this very strongly, that most regrets in life are acts of omission rather than acts of commission. And certainly you can do things, there are acts of commission that you could deeply regret. But I think for most people, and most of the time, it's the things we don't do. We always wonder what might have been.
Jeff, take us back to the early days. How did Amazon really get started? And did you really run it out of a garage?
We did. I rented a house in Bellevue, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle, and we had up to 4. We moved out of that garage when we had 4 employees. We were mostly at that time, writing the software and getting ready to open our doors. There wasn't enough electric power in the garage, so we siphoned we'd flip the circuit breaker, so we had to siphon electric power from all over the house into the garage. Big orange extension cords running from every room into the garage. It was time to move. We moved and we launched our business in July of 1995, opened the doors, and in the first 30 days, we got orders from 45 different countries, all 50 states. We packing boxes on the floor. I would drive the boxes at 10 p.m. to the main Seattle post office in my Chevy Blazer myself every night. The last thing I would do before going home. So that was, 18 years ago, and we've had a lot of luck and a lot of planetary alignment since then, I can assure you.
Well, just think about it. Jeff is now worth $19 billion. What do you think of that? Now, all of you entrepreneurs, you can do the same. You've said in the past that a company learns as much from its failures as it does from its successes. Do you really believe that? And can you talk about what you've learned from your failures?
Well,
and are there any failures? I can't think of any.
Believe me. The way I think about it is, if you want to invent, if you want to do any innovation, anything new, you're going to have failures because you need to experiment. And I think the amount of useful invention that you have is directly proportional to the number of experiments that you can do per week, per month, per year. And so if you're going to increase the number of experiments, you're going to also increase the number of failures. I would tell you that I think that at least the way we do innovation at Amazon, it's part and parcel with our customer centricity. So we start with the customer and we work backwards. It's part and parcel with the idea that we need to be long-term oriented. And so invention often takes a long time. Because of the setbacks and the failures, it's more fun, I think, to be a pioneer, to be an explorer. It can be a successful business strategy to be a close follower, and many companies do succeed at close following. That's not easy either, but it's a very different thing. And at Amazon, we've ended up selecting over time a big group of people who love to invent, who wake up in the shower every morning and they're thinking about ways that we can improve our experience for customers. And I'll tell you the other thing I know about failure and invention is you've got to be willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time if you're going to invent. Because anything new and different is initially going to be misunderstood. It'll be misunderstood by well-meaning critics who just are worried that it's a new way and might not work out. It will also be misunderstood, of course, by self-interested critics who, have a profit stream connected to the old way of doing things. But if you can't weather that kind of misunderstanding and criticism, then whatever you do, don't do anything new, because it's part and parcel with invention.
Well, I'll tell you, this is really interesting to me. Amazon always seems to be doing something new, and to use a special word, disruptive. Kindle and your cloud services are really good examples of that. Now, tell me a little bit about what you think about disruption.
Well, we seek to do things in new and better ways. And if you're successful at doing something in a new way, it disrupts the old way. It's creative disruption. And all things have to evolve. And one of the ways that things evolve is that entrepreneurs, people, many people in this room, come up with new ways of doing things. And in our case, we think of it as it's our job to build the best customer experience we can. In our retail business, that means, for example, the lowest prices, the fastest delivery, the best, most vast selection, and then customers choose where they want to shop. And so sometimes I get asked about, competitors and, do we worry about our competitors or do we feel bad for them in, some cases? And sometimes we do. I can be very sentimental about bookstores and things like that. I grew up as a kid reading physical books, and I can be as sentimental as the next person. But I also will say, it's not our job to choose how people want to read. So with something like Kindle, we tried selling ebooks, by the way, for 10 plus years and nobody came to the party. You needed an electron microscope to find the sales. But they were being, we were selling them so that people would read them on laptops. And so we finally decided we're going to have to build a device that people will like. And that's the thing that actually ended up causing the disruption. It was this device that disappeared, got out of your way, so that you could enter into the author's world and lose yourself in the story the way that people can with a physical book. And that's what created that disruption. And it's just important to keep in mind that customers get to choose that.
Is this where the idea of Kindle came from? And that's
yes, that was
arose?
exactly where the idea for Kindle came from, was thinking about how in the world are we going to get ahead of, ebooks are inevitable. This is one of those things, we have a business selling physical books, we want to cannibalize ourselves, and so we try it with ebooks, nobody comes. And finally deciding, like, even you're reading on a laptop, think about how that pulls you out of the story. It has a short battery life, so you're always worried, you have battery anxiety. It's warm and hot, so if you're holding it in your lap starts sweating, and your hand, it's too heavy to hold. You can't read on a laptop. It's no fun, and it pulls you out of the story. So that became our vision for Kindle One, which we launched 5 years ago. And Kindle One was an instant success. We sold out in 5 hours. We didn't build enough, and we had to ramp up our manufacturing, and people really started reading that way. We're now in our 5th generation of Kindle, and the team has done an extraordinary job.
And that's how you got into device manufacturing?
Yeah, that's how we got into device manufacturing. We were kind of forced into it, and because we wanted to be the one who cannibalized us instead of letting somebody else do it. But sometimes people say, and I get this about Amazon Web Services a lot, but I also get it about the Kindle device business, where I did earlier. And the question is always, why not stick to the knitting? So, and my point of view on sticking to the knitting is that it's not the right thing for most businesses to be that focused. It's true that you hone skills in a business. You learn to be really good at a few things, and you do want to extend out from those skills. But your customer needs change slowly over time, and you have to learn new skills on behalf of your customers. So basically, we had a bunch of readers as customers, people who love to read. And they didn't know it, our customers, they weren't asking directly, but basically they were saying to us, you're going to have to learn a new skill. You're going to have to stretch and learn how to manufacture hardware so that you can continue to serve me 10 years from now. That's what our customers were telling us. And that's good. If businesses, try new things and stretch their muscles and put themselves in uncomfortable situations, I think one of the reasons that businesses stick to the knitting is because it's way more comfortable. As soon as you're doing something new, it's like being a toddler all over again. You get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down. And so businesses need to do that same thing. They need to remember that it's not that bad to fall down, and it doesn't hurt that much. When we try things like Amazon Web Services, we didn't know that was going to work. It has worked really well, but it's the kind of thing that if it hadn't worked, I always tell people, well, guess what? If something doesn't work, the day we stop doing it, all that will happen is our operating margins will improve. It won't be that bad. And companies get afraid. I think most companies get criticized for experiments that they tried that failed. But really, companies should be criticized for the omissions, the things they should have tried and didn't. And those almost always go unremarked.
Now, this is interesting to me. Has the transformation to digital versions of books, music, movies, and television programs, has that affected people's appetite for consuming content? And if so, how?
Here's the general rule here is that we humans do more of anything that's made easier. So if the friction level gets reduced, we do more of that thing. And so I can tell you that people who buy a Kindle read 4 times as many books in the 12 months after they bought the Kindle than they did in the 12 months prior to buying the Kindle. 4 times as many books. And the reason is we're reducing the friction of reading. You have your whole library with you. You can think of a book and be reading it 60 seconds later. It's lighter than a physical book. You can change the font size when your eyes get tired. You can look up words So there's so many advantages to reading that way that once people start reading that way, they end up reading more because it's less friction. And that's true of all the different media types. When they get digitized, people have faster access to them, whether it be music or video, and they start doing more of that. I'm really excited about long-form reading because I think we, as humans, we learn different things from long form than we can learn from short form. When you read a novel or a biography, you actually do get to live another life, and you learn things that way, I think, that are unlearnable in any kind of short form, whether it be a movie or a TV show or a blog post or a song. You learn different things.
Well, so are paper books going away?
So far, no. In fact, people who switch to digital books they buy Kindle books and they keep buying physical books. I think if you look long enough in the future, physical books won't go away, but they will become kind of objects. They'll be interesting objects that we still like, but they probably won't be. We still like horses, but we don't commute on them. And so there'll be a lot of love for books, and people, but I think people eventually will mostly read in electronic form.
Well, it's apparent you don't know some of our Utahns. They do commute.
I actually, over Thanksgiving weekend, went on a 3-day, 45-mile trail ride with my brother and father. And my butt is still a little sore.
Tell me about your father. Tell me a little bit about your family. And you were telling me about your great dad and how he got here and so forth. I think that'd be interesting.
My dad has an interesting life story because he is a Cuban immigrant. He came here as part of Operation Pedro Pan right after Castro took over in Cuba. And he had a warm reception here in the United States. Was picked up by a Catholic mission in Delaware. He was a 15-year-old boy. His parents sent him away thinking that Castro would last maybe 6 months or a year, and he was starting to write anti-Castro graffiti on buildings and stuff, which was a very dangerous thing for a 15-year-old to do at that time. And so he came here, and of course he didn't see his parents for many years because Castro didn't go away, and the borders got shut down, and but he was very lucky because he got picked up by this Catholic mission along with 15 other Cuban boys. They put him through high school and taught him English and even ended up giving him a scholarship to college. And so it really worked out well for him. His parents finally were able to immigrate to the U.S. Many years later. So it's a very good news story, but to me, my dad is a real patriot. He loves this country the way only really immigrants really can.
Well, that's tremendous. We now have young Marco Rubio in the Senate, and he is really something. I think as you get to know him, I think the whole country's going to just love him. But let me ask you about the cloud. I understand that Amazon Web Services is one of the leading providers of what some people call cloud computing infrastructure. What is the cloud? And how did that come about inside Amazon?
Well, about 7 years ago, we started selling these cloud computing services. And our take on this was very, very foundational infrastructural services. Think of selling storage and compute and queuing service, and now there are a bunch of different services. But the basic fundamentals, like if you read through a Computer Science 101 textbook, all the fundamental primitives of computer science, we said, let's just build a service for each of those. And the reason we started doing that initially was we were just going to do it for ourselves. We realized we were wasting a lot of time having our applications software engineers having fine-grained conversations that took a lot of time and energy and effort with our network center, the data center, the networking engineers in the data center. And those conversations were not of high value. They didn't improve our competitiveness at all. They were sort of price of admission conversations and planning. And so we said, what we really need to do is build a set of APIs, application programming interfaces, that hardens the data center so that applications programmers can just say, we'll just write code to that set of APIs. And then we can have, with coarse-grained conversations, much higher leverage conversations about what APIs we need to extend the data center. And to give you an analogy, it would be to the electric grid. And I went on a tour in Luxembourg of a brewery, a 300-year-old brewery, family brewery. They've been making beer in Luxembourg for centuries. And they showed me their museum. And one of the things that they had in their museum was an electric power generator that they had installed in the early 20th century so that they could make their beer. And of course, as soon as they got the electric grid, they disconnected the power generator from their factory and put it in the museum. And because making their own electric power didn't make their beer taste any better. And that's what it is to run a data center. For most companies, the data center is just a bunch of undifferentiated heavy lifting. It's keeping all the servers, operating systems upgraded to the latest version. You end up with a heterogeneous collection of hardware that has to be managed. It's a very complicated task, and it has to be done at the highest quality level, but it doesn't differentiate your product or your service. It's just like the electric grid in that way. And so we set out to make the 21st century electric grid. We were designing it for ourselves, and we said, wait, with a little extra effort, we can turn this into a product that other people will buy. And so we did that. And this was definitely, internally, we had a lot of debate, because most outside observers thought we were completely insane. Here's a retailer that's now going to compete with HP and IBM and Oracle and all of the big companies that have big enterprise, Microsoft, enterprise sales forces, because this is a business-to-business business. It's not one that you sell to consumers. But we had it was our point of view on this was, okay, I understand it's a completely different business and that we have very little expertise in it, but why not? It's a good idea, and we do have expertise in running big data centers. We do have expertise in we know what APIs to build because we know we're the first customer for all those APIs. So it really did, and now it's turned into a significant business in its own right. And that, again, that's a team, just like the Kindle team, it's another team that's just doing a fantastic job.
What do you think? You enjoying this? So what does a typical Amazon Web Services customer look like, and how do they use AWS?
Well, it started out with startup companies mostly, and that's where we expected it to start. But now it's grown, and the AWS customers are, government agencies, big Fortune 500 enterprises, educational institutions. People are doing big, heavy-duty computational fluid dynamics calculations. They're doing genome calculations. They're doing computational chemistry calculations. They can spin up. The thing that's unusual about AWS is that how much compute you need is elastic. So you can have 5,000 servers for an hour and then return them. And so that's really good for companies that are going to have difficulty forecasting how much compute they need. Most data centers operate at very low utilization rates. They operate at 15, 16, 17% utilization. And that's actually about where they want to operate. If they operate much more than that, they're going to clip their peak usage and not be able to handle peak hours or peak minutes. And so one of the great things about cloud computing and having a bunch of customers sharing a big pool of servers is that you get to smooth out that peak utilization. So we can operate our AWS cloud at much higher utilization rates than any one of our customers could operate their own data center. So it's really it's a win for the customer. It transforms their fixed expense. It transforms CapEx into a variable cost. So all these services are pay as you go, which is a big deal, not just for startup companies, although it is big for startup companies, but it's a big deal for Fortune 500 companies too. Nobody likes CapEx.
Well, how do you maintain a creative culture at Amazon so that you can continue to invent and develop new products and services and businesses?
Well, one of the things about first of all, it's somewhat about the selection of the people. So if you want to have a creative culture, when I interview people, I ask them to give me an example of something they've invented. And I always point out it doesn't have to be something that you actually took to the patent office, but it could be a metric that you invented and followed carefully. It could be a business process that you invented. But how do you go about, what's your method for? So you want to select people who like to invent their way out of boxes. And don't necessarily immediately go to either or. We can do A or B. And the right question is, how can we do A and B? What invention do we need to be able to do both? So that's a lot about selection of people. And the great thing about corporate cultures is they're very self-reinforcing. So somebody who comes to Amazon and doesn't like pioneering, doesn't like exploring, doesn't like going down blind alleys that oftentimes turn out to be dead ends, they'll leave. They're self-selecting. And so we have, over the last 18 years, collected a bunch of people who really enjoy this kind of pioneering approach. And we don't ever claim that our approach is the only one in business. In fact, I could point to lots of successful companies who are they pursue close following strategies, which are incredibly difficult to do, and they do it well. And they've generated lots of returns for shareholders that way, but it's not who we are. It's just not our approach. In fact, we've never been very successful with anything. We look at other companies. You don't want to be hermetically sealed. We do pay attention to what other companies do. We try to be inspired by it. We try to say, okay, take that idea, the kernel of that idea, and how can we take that and then put an Amazon twist on it and do something unique, differentiated, not me too.
Well, that's great. We're honoring two people here this evening as inductees.
Yes.
Josh James has been tremendously
Who I was
successful
sitting
and
next to at
innovative.
dinner.
Yeah, I heard him chewing your ear off there. It was really good. And then also Fred Lampropoulos, who's just been a terrific person here in this state for us and for employment and so forth. But let me just say, can you tell us a bit more about the third-party seller business?
Yeah.
I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And how did you make the decision to open up Amazon's websites to other sellers? Was that controversial?
It was very controversial inside the company and outside the company. But it came back to our vision. Our founding, as I mentioned earlier, the concept was universal selection of books. And when we started adding new product categories, we kept that idea that it would be universal selection. And so we realized very early that the only way we were really going to get to universal selection of all product categories is if we invited third-party sellers to join us on our website. And the first thing we did was launch Amazon Auctions, and that failed. And then we launched something called Z Shops, and that failed. And then our third try was Amazon Marketplace, and that succeeded. So that's an example. What I ask people inside Amazon to do is be stubborn on the vision and flexible on the details. We knew we needed to make third-party sellers successful on Amazon. We just didn't know how to do it. And so we had to go through 3 iterations, and it finally worked. And now it's 40% of units sold on Amazon. It's a huge part of our business.
That's tremendous. How do you give confidence to others, both inside and outside Amazon, that these long-term investments will ultimately pay off?
Well, that is a very good question. The long term has to eventually come. we're very long-term oriented, but one of the things we did this back in 2005, 2006, and every once in a while, we internally, just to prove to ourselves that we're correctly assessing the health of all of our different initiatives, we like to kind of demonstrate to ourselves that the business model is really working. And so we did that in 2005, 2006. At some point in the future, I don't know when, we'll do that again. We internally can have conviction on some of the things we do because we can tease apart, our established retail business and our established geographies. We know very well how well that business is doing, and that we love that business. It sets a high bar for everything else we might do because that business is such a good business that some of the people in this room must be buying shoes from us, and I bless you for that because we're selling a lot of shoes. So these are great businesses, and our first duty is always to take our established businesses and make sure that they continue to be healthy and generate lots of free cash flow, because that free cash flow is what allows us to enter into new things like Amazon Web Services and new geographies. We're investing in China. We're investing in our digital media business. So those kinds of things. But it's hard to have conviction about whether something will work. And the only thing that I can offer, every once in a while, you get a crisp moment of clarity where you just know some things are going to work if you are persistent enough. And I think you can only do that if you start with the customer and work backwards. I don't think you can build that kind of clarity on what your competitors are doing or what kinds of technologies are available in the marketplace. That kind of clarity can only come from a deep understanding of customer needs. And the good thing about customer needs is they change slowly in time, so you can count on them. I know for a fact that 10 years from now, Amazon's customers will still want low prices. I know for a fact that Amazon's customers 10 years from now will still want fast delivery. They'll still want vast selection. And there's no chance that 10 years from now, somebody will come to me and say, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. So because those customer needs are so foundational, sometimes around those things you can get real clarity. And then you can invest, and you can know that your investments will pay dividends for customers over time.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you tell us a bit more about how you decide what new areas of business to get into?
Well, there are a few things that we think about when we get into new business. First of all, we want to know if it's successful, can it be meaningful in the context of Amazon's overall business? So we don't want to do things, it doesn't have to be successful. That's okay. We don't want any guarantees that the business is going to be successful before we get into it. But we do want to know that if we're lucky enough that the business is successful, it has to be meaningful. Our business is already at a scale where it doesn't make sense for us to focus on small industries. So that's one of the things that we like about digital media. It's a big industry. It's one of the things we like about Amazon Web Services. It has the potential to be a very big industry. Our retail business, retail is, the largest retailer in the world still has, single-digit market shares. These are huge, trillion-dollar markets, so retail can grow to a very large size. And so we want that. We want to know that if it's successful, that it has attractive returns on invested capital. So, we want to be able to convince ourselves that if it works, that there is a return one day on that investment. The third thing we look for is we really want differentiation. That's part of our culture. We're not very good at Me Too product offerings. I'll give you an example. I get asked, and I have been asked for the last 15 years, when are you guys going to open physical stores? And I tell people as soon as we have a differentiated idea, because if we were to open physical stores and do it the same way everybody else does physical stores, we would just be, if there are already 100 well-run physical stores, if we're lucky enough to do a good job and have a well-run physical store, we would be the 101st well-run physical store. And that doesn't really add anything to the world. It's a kind of redundancy that customers end up not paying you for, and it's not fun.
Well, Amazon is in some very competitive industries. How do you stay on top?
Well, you know, to a fault, we are not competitively focused enough. In fact, we try to do a lot of benchmarking internally because we don't have that conqueror mentality. Those are the people who get their energy in the morning from figuring out who are the 3 companies we're going to kill this year, tend not to stay at Amazon because they're very bored at Amazon, because we really put, 99% of our attention on the customer experience. And so, and I say that, with a little bit of, that culture is our strength, but your strengths are also, can also be your Achilles heel. And so we do have some formal programs inside the company. We have some formal benchmarking teams that try to look at competitors and see what they're doing and bring back reports because it's not our natural starting place. I think the good news for us is that the internet arena, the areas where we operate are so fast moving that pioneering mentality actually works better. It's awfully hard to be a close follower on the internet because things change so rapidly. But these are competitive industries, and we work hard to offer the best customer experience. And that is, that will sound overly simplistic, but that is basically how we try to stay in our leadership position, by offering a great customer experience. The other thing that I would say is that many times the media, especially the blogosphere with the kind of the headlines that get written in the blogosphere, they too often make everything in business look like a pitched battle because it's more fun to read that way. Rivalries are fun to read about, so everything is this is going to be a Kindle killer or an iPad killer or, and the reality is in business, most of the time, industries rise and fall. And so there's usually room for more than one winner. There are some business arenas where winner takes all. I'm not crazy about those arenas. I prefer arenas where there are 2 or 3 or even half a dozen winners because your odds of being one of the winners are so much better. So oftentimes, it's not the pitched battle that you read about in the media. It's not a sporting competition where there really is a winner and a loser.
One last question. Congratulations on being named Fortune Magazine's 2012 Business Person of the Year. What's next, and what do you have? What kind of advice do you have for our up-and-coming entrepreneurs that might be in the audience tonight?
Well, I have my advice is pretty simple, and it is, there are a lot of experienced entrepreneurs in this audience tonight, and I would love to get I would love to get your advice.
I still want the what next answer too.
Okay, the what next is that one always stymies me because the things I actually can think of are secret.
I knew it. I knew that's what
I have to come up with. I have to come up with a what's next that I'm not actually thinking about. The advice that I would give entrepreneurs is, and I do this. I meet sometimes with young, aspiring entrepreneurs and college grads, and I have the main thing is don't chase the hot new thing, whatever it is. It's so hard to catch something that everybody already knows is hot. Instead, position yourself and wait for the wave to come to you. And so then you would say, well, where? Position myself where? And I think what you do, position yourself in something that captures your curiosity, something that that you're missionary about. Well, I tell people when we acquire companies, I'm always trying to figure out, is this person who leads this company a missionary or a mercenary? And I don't like mercenaries, and I don't like mercenary cultures. And the missionary is building the product, building the service because they love the customer, because they love the product, because they love the service. The mercenary is building the product or the service so that they can flip the company and make money. And one of the great paradoxes is that the missionaries usually end up making more money than the mercenaries anyway. And so pick something you're passionate about. That's my number one piece of advice. And the second thing is, once you've done that, just start with the customer and work backwards. Those two things will take you an awfully long way.
I just want to thank you for all of us, on behalf of all of us. You're great.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. Appreciate the effort very, very much.